It's a really good question. How do you get to the Feywild? It kind of depends how. The answer is however you want, right? And you can sort of back into it based on inspiration or based on other ideas that you want to kind of co-opt. I've had players end up in the Feywild a few different ways. One of my favorites was when, um, like, one way to say it is that the only way into the Feywild is if you get there when you're not intending to go there. So imagine that you're traveling through the forest, you get sort of turned around, and then basically suddenly you're there. You've crossed the veil. You're mysteriously there. I like my Feywild to be very sort of lacking in explanation. I like it to be mysterious and even a little bit threatening, a little bit more Mad Hatter and like kind of fairy tale like than just a sort of magical enhanced nature. Let's see. With the right characters and NPCs, you can sort of, I think, find a way, through a hole in a tree, let's say, and find your way to the Feywild. I think that that's possible. Could also be fun to, depending on your world, depending on the kind of stuff you like to do. Maybe there is a musical type, uh, like a poem or like a song that if you follow its instructions nonsensically, you'll get there. Since I recently finished Alan Wake 2, a big part of the Alan Wake franchise is rituals and sort of recreating scenes. So I think that could be an interesting way. I've not tried this in my games yet, but it would be interesting if the party could somehow recreate a scene at the forest edge. Somehow they might open up a way there. Yeah, exactly right. Where it's like, wait, should we really make like this tea party scene out of? But you could, if you wanted to, you could make it like a children's thing, or you could make it kind of dark, where it's like, wait, like a tea party with like rabbits. Like, do we need to like pose like rabbits in like a in this scene to like recreate this moment and get through the break through the veil? Yeah, all sorts of fun stuff. I've also had another fun way to get into the Feywild is to have somebody from the Feywild basically pull the party in. So I've done that once or twice before, where there's basically a Fey present that they can make a deal with, because getting into the Feywild, I think about the Feywild sometimes and other planes in general as sort of like it's like a side hallway. Like, let's say that there's something the party, in one case the party needed to get through basically a walled up part of the dungeon and there was no way through. But with this friendly fairy, hey, just step over into the Feywild and I can take you to another, exit point through this hole in a tree, and you exit there and you'll be in the room that you're looking for. I can take you there just through this plane and then back over into the dungeon. That was a fun situation because only half the party decided to go with the fairy, so we actually had a couple of sessions where the party was on two different planes. And I think the fun thing about taking a trip through the Feywild is that um, time doesn't have to obey the same rules as it does in the plane that they're from. So I've had players that slip into the Feywild and come out 2 days before they went in, or they were only in the Feywild for a few hours, but they come out and it's been a week, or they had a whole adventure in the Feywild. They spent a few days or maybe a week in the Feywild, and they come out, it's been 11 months, right? And so each of these times they're very wary of any trip through that place. Even though it's kind of fantastical and interesting and exciting, it's also very dangerous. And I think the key is to keep people guessing about the Feywild. As soon as you feel like you're understanding it, then I feel like you need to jostle it somehow. Another really fun trick as players go into the Feywild is to have language be a factor. uh, one of the first things that one of my parties faced getting into the Feywild is, they saw fairies and maybe satyrs and things hopping around, and one of the fairies approached them very cordially and said, "Hello, nice to meet you. May I have your name?" And the first player to respond with their name, the Fae took it. And so now that player had to change their name. That player couldn't use that name anymore. It was taken. And then in that same experience at one point, before they left, another one of the party was offered by one of the Fae an apple. Would you care for an apple? And they said, sure. And they took it. Didn't think anything of it, and then were revisited by that same Fae some many sessions later because the player had not cared for the apple. The player had not, as the Fae would expect, eaten it, used it, taken the seeds, planted a tree. Did they care for the apple? They did not do that. So now you've effectively broken your deal with the Fae, and now you're going to need to do a couple more tasks for them because, that's not up to their standards of cordial behavior. What's up, Construct? Yeah, any sort of sometimes it's just a matter of looking for sort of like double entendres or like, hidden meaning phrases and just finding a way that the Fae can work that in. It has gotten to the point, now this is the other side of that, but it has gotten to the point with my players that they almost aren't willing to interact with the Fae, which is like out of an abundance of caution. Like if they're interacting with the Fae, they're likely to just kind of stonewall them, which I think is kind of funny, kind of a bummer because obviously it's more exciting to sort of try to make your way through those interactions. But hey, can't blame them. Somebody lost their name. Another time they were yeah, exactly. It's respect, right? They're showing respect. The Feywild was also a place that I created them, or that the task that they had to do when they were brought in to the Feywild because they hadn't cared for the apple. The task was to basically save a member of the Fey court. The Fey sound like mob bosses, and that was a situation where I was able to use basically like a town inside of a time loop bubble. So the party was sent into this kind of silly town and had to figure out what was going on, figure out that it was a time loop. They didn't know that it was when they were sort of crossing the barrier, this kind of strange threshold. And they had to sort that out and save the member of the court. What's up, Noel? There it is. Just like that. Have I made unicorns Fey Deathbringers yet? No. I don't think I've used a unicorn. I used a Fey Dragon once to one of their trips through the Feywild. They encountered a Fey sort of like crystal dragon, and it it showed up and it basically sucked all the magic out of each of their primary weapons, which if you want a way to get your party's attention, just say, yep, and your sword is common, and your bow, and your wand, and your whatever. It's just the dragon just ate it. Proceed with caution. But the dragon was like, I'll return these to you in exchange for you telling me, feeding me effectively. I eat secrets. So tell me a secret about you that you know that nobody's ever heard before, and I'll give you your magic back. So it was basically like started out as, hey, maybe this is a combat session, and then turned into, oh, this is kind of like a role-playing session where, or encounter, I should say, where each member gets to sort of, effectively sort of invent a secret, something about themselves, and share it. And then if the dragon found it adequate, they would get their magic back. That's true, Ben. A lot of my best ideas about the Feywild are just Dale's ideas. I've used them, So I feel possessive over them now. But yeah, most of my ideas have come from Dale.